Okay. So I think I got it going.
Okay.
Okay. So thanks for joining. You guys have seen the flyer. I think this is our 7th week of doing this. Is it our 7th or 8th? I don't remember exactly. And I think we have about 32 people on. So I'll go quickly because we have so many things to talk about. This is not like the typical sessions where we have, you know, experts come and present. I mean, in some ways we have experts as well. But this is meant to be a presentation where folks share their ideas and provide tips. And it's not always going to be a one-size-fits-all. So listen to it and see how it applies to you. So we have to provide caveat that to use any of this, you may want to consult your financial advisor or your legal advisor or your tax accountant. But other than that, it's just tips, and we're going to repeat this at least 2-3 times because we're in America and there's always a threat of lawsuit somewhere. But so essentially take it for what it is. These guys, I am very excited. I think most people that know them know that we couldn't think that you know, they are just the best people to have here to talk about some of this. So topic for today is 10 ways to save or grow your wealth, right? So what are you currently doing that you can change that will help put money in your pocket or grow your wealth? And the panelists are going to share their ideas, but we all welcome everybody on. If you have ideas that are working for you that you think may also be useful for other people to hear, let's all share it and see how we can make our community richer, better, support one another. Okay, so they're going to go through 10 ideas. Use the chat feature to ask your questions. And if you can help it, let's hold off on the verbal questions until they are done. But if you think you really need to chime in, feel free. So I'm happy to have our panelist, Greg Okafor, Akalaka, as we commonly call him, Chima Nwosu, and Dr. Oji Agbai. Okay, so at this time I'm gonna stop presenting and have Oji start presenting, and you all can take it over. And thank you all for doing this, by the way.
Welcome.
All right, guys. Just 1 second. Let me pull up the PowerPoint. Okay. Can you all see the screen?
Yes.
Oh, wait. Hold up. Zoom share. Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. All right, welcome. So we've already kind of had an introduction. And so we're going to start off with Mr. Gregory Okafor, saving and building through insurance.
Okay. Thank you so much, Oji. Good evening, everybody, and thanks to Go, our president, and Colette Ujenibu, our president, for all the hard work in putting this together. This has been wonderful. My name is Greg Okafor. They usually call me Akalaka. I live in Powder Spring. My office is in Smyrna. I'm the principal agent and agency owner, Farmers Insurance, Gregory Agency, for over 10 years. Today we discuss ways to save money, grow wealth, and thrive during this COVID-19. So I hope after this discussion, we can take out some tips, because this time is very challenging. It's very uncertain. I will talk about auto insurance first. So one thing we recommend is to, when it comes to auto insurance, we always recommend to do a policy review once every 3 years. 2 reasons. One is to make sure you're getting the right coverages. Secondly, to shop your rate. You can see how much you can save if you can review your policy, especially people that have been with a company for a long time. So we always recommend you to shop your policy, get different quotes. Then bundle your auto and home, bundle it together. It's not advisable to have your auto with State Farm, have your home with Farmers. You need to bundle it together. You can save about 20%. Then reduce the coverages. During the policy review, that's one of the reasons why I always encourage my customer to come in for a policy review. We recommend, like if your car is over 10 years old, you can remove the compound collision to save money. Because what happens is, if there's an accident and your car is totaled, the company is going to give you the book value. And after they deduct the deductible, it don't really make sense having a compound collision. Another thing we recommend is that,
Can you repeat that again? Sorry, go ahead.
Another thing we recommend is the deductible.
Oh, I'm sorry, Greg, I think he was just asking if you can repeat what you just said.
Just the last sentence.
Compound collision?
Yes.
Okay, if your car is over 10 years old, we recommend you, if you want to save money, I repeat, you can remove the compound collision. Because what happens is, if there's an accident, the company will give you the book value of that car. After they deduct the deductible, most of the time, you won't be able to replace that car. So we recommend you to remove that if you want to save money. It's good to increase the deductible. Some people have $100 deductible, $250. On an auto insurance, we always recommend to have at least $500 or $1,000. Because you don't want to file small claims. Insurance is not for filing small claims, it's for major claims. So when something major happens, your car is total, the insurance company will replace it. It doesn't make sense filing small claims, because what happens, you affect your rate. So you can file a claim for $2,000, a claim for $5,000, it doesn't really matter, it's a claim. So it's always advisable to file major claims, not small claims. And I always advise my clients to call me before they file a claim. They don't have to call me, but for them to, it would be good for them to call me so I can advise them. So there's a lot of discounts that you want to make sure that you're getting on an auto policy. Yeah, e-policy discount, so you get everything through electronic, paperless discount, EFT discount, pay in full discount. If you pay one pay, you get a big discount. If you can afford it. Then if your kids are on your policy, if they are under 25 years old and they are good students with 3.0 GPA, they get a good student discount. Then defensive driver discount. You can take a defensive driver course and you can get a discount, and it's good for 3 years. So all these discounts will help you on your auto insurance. And a lot of times, most companies like farmers, we have what we call Signal. It monitors your driving. Most major companies have it, like State Farm or State. They have an app that monitors your driving. And that can give you up to 15% discount. So what happened on the app, it gives you that discount, but if you're not a good driver, it's not going to go up. You're going to lose that discount. So it's very, very popular. So let's go to the home insurance. Oji. Okay, now on the home insurance, we have to bundle the home and auto, like I said on the auto insurance. Again, on the deductibles, increase the deductible. But one thing I want to emphasize is on claims. I want to really emphasize on claims. Because, especially when it comes to roof, there's a lot of contractors driving around neighborhoods, telling people they can have insurance company to replace their roof. And it's very popular. But I kind of want to make sure we understand it. Your insurance covers the dwelling, it covers the roof. But if your house is 20 years old, 50 years old, 70 years old, the roof hasn't been changed, insurance is not going to cover that. So what happened is, if your roof is old, you have to replace your roof. So a lot of times people will file a claim, they want insurance company to replace their roof, and they will deny the claim. And it goes against you, it's on your record. So I always advise my clients, if your roof is leaking, find out why. If it's wind damage, if it's hail damage, the insurance company is going to cover it. But if it's wear and tear, if it's old, they're not going to cover it. And that thing goes on your record. And if you file a lot of claims, guess what's going to happen? The insurance company is going to non-renew you. Of course, most insurance companies is not going to insure you. Like with farmers, we can only take only one claim in 3 years. So even if you find a company that will renew you or will insure you, it's going to be expensive. The air conditioner is old. You call the insurance company to replace it, insurance company is not going to replace it. But if it's a lightning struck the air conditioner, they will replace it. So always consult your insurance agent before you file a claim so they can advise you. It's very, very important because all that stuff affects your rate. If you have a new roof, we'll give you a new roof discount. If you have an alarm, that's an alarm discount. If you replace your system like the plumbing, electrical, and the AC, you get a discount. Then another thing is on the basement. Most people, when they buy a home, the basement is not finished, and they finish the basement. A home is based on replacement cost, how much it will cost to replace that home. So if you finish your basement, you need to call your insurance agent so they can run another replacement cost to make sure your property is adequately insured. Because if you don't call them, it's underinsured. If there's a loss, the insurance company will pay you based on replacement costs when the policy was purchased. Then life insurance. Life insurance is not the most pleasant thing to talk about. But planning for your family's future can help protect them and keep them financially secure when you are not here to take care of them. If you're wondering if life insurance is right for you, you should ask yourself the following questions. If I die tomorrow, how will my family be impacted financially? If I die tomorrow, can my family afford the home that we're living in? If I die tomorrow, can my family manage all our living expenses? What about your home? Would they be able to pay that home, or would the mortgage company foreclose? Without insurance protection, you will leave your family in debt and financial risk. Life insurance proceeds can help your loved ones replace the income they depend on from you. Life insurance may help you keep your final expenses from being a burden on those who you leave behind. And life insurance is one of the greatest gifts that you can give to your loved ones. But it's very emotional. Our community don't want to talk about it. Black Americans don't want to talk about it. We think it's a bad luck. If you talk about life insurance, am I about to die? You're wishing me bad luck. It's a taboo. But we have to talk about it. All of us are going to go. And you have to provide for your loved ones when you're gone. It is what it is. But the Caucasians, they understand the value of life insurance and they buy life insurance. So what are the reasons why people need life insurance? What are the reasons? People buy it for wealth creation. They want to create wealth. You're having a new baby, you're getting married, you buy life insurance. Of course, the death benefit. When somebody dies, you get paid. Income replacement. Husband and wife working, you have life insurance in case somebody dies and the income is replaced. Mortgage protection. Mortgage protection. So when you buy a house, you have a 10-year mortgage, 20-year mortgage, 30-year mortgage, you buy a life insurance to protect that mortgage. So if anything happens, the mortgage is paid for. So you worry about the lost one, but you don't worry about those financial burden. To pay estate taxes. If you have a business, you have a partner, a lot of partners buy life insurance to protect them if the partner dies. Then we have different types of life insurance. Of course, we have whole life. It's good up to year 121. It's a permanent policy. It has cash value. You can borrow from the cash value in case of emergency. We have term life. It's good for 10 years, 20 years, and 30 years. But very important, you can convert it to whole life. And if you don't have enough money, you don't want to spend a lot on life insurance, you're still a student, you're just come out of school, you can get a term life, but convert it to life insurance. Convert it to whole life, I'm sorry. Then we have a juvenile policy. This is for children age 1 to 18. Juvenile policy is a whole life. It's very, very important. That's one of the best gifts you can give to a child. What most people do is when they have a child, they buy life insurance. When they have a child, they buy life insurance. That's the best gift you can give a child. So why is it very special? There's no medical required. It's guaranteed insurability. There's no underwriting. Usually kids are healthy. Usually kids don't have high blood pressure. They don't have cholesterol. Because what happened is life insurance premium is based on age and health. It's based on how old you are and how healthy you are. So, but our community, what we do is like when we are older or when we are diagnosed with a sickness, they want life insurance. Then the premium is very expensive or you cannot be insured. So that's why it's very important to get it for kids when they are young and healthy, and it's very cheap. Of course, it has cash value when they go to college. Then another thing I want to spend a lot of time, I want to make sure that our community pay a special attention to this is the funeral policy graded death benefit. The face value is 30,000. We call it graded death funeral policy. The maximum face value is 30,000. There's no medical. You answer a couple of questions. It's electronic underwriting. You have a life insurance. Life insurance. I think this is the basic. That's the most basic each of us should have. Funeral insurance. All this waykeeping. If you have a funeral insurance, 30,000 can take your body back home if that's what you want. If you have to be buried here, 30,000 can do that. You can still have your waykeeping, but it will not be too much strain on your family, on your loved one, on the community. 30,000, there's no medical required, only 3 questions, up to 30,000. So thank you so much, and we'll go to the next topic.
All right, well, I'm going to get started. Opportunities in real estate. And yes, I am a physician. Most people know me as in being in medicine, but also my other passion is real estate. And I am a real estate investor, or at least working on building up my portfolio. So for the past several years, this has been something, real estate has been a passion of mine. And I recently became a full-fledged real estate agent. And I also, so I'm actually at Keller Williams. And I also have a real estate financing business for investors. It's called Private Cash Man. So I help to put together the financing for investors, such as Chima, for example, or anybody doing fix and flips, rentals, refinancing of investment properties. I don't do anything on the residential side, meaning where the home, where the person is living in the house. Only for investment properties can I do that. But in terms of my realtor background, I can do anything. I can do, of course, anything a normal realtor can do. My niche is investments, but I can help anybody who is looking to buy, sell, or invest in real estate. So I'm gonna, first of all, start out by talking about the real estate market cycle, when to buy, sell, and rent. So one key thing to understand when it comes to real estate is that the media oftentimes will talk about there's a real estate bubble, and will say stuff like the real estate bubble is about to pop and it's not a good time to be in real estate and things like that. All those things, those are sentiments that people have. But the thing is, if you have a fundamental understanding of what's going on with the real estate real estate market cycle, then you can understand that, hey, this is actually something that can be expected. You can understand that, for example, if the real estate prices are high now, you will expect for some point for it to start to go in a decline, but it's going to come back again in time. And so I'm going to give an example here using using an example going back since 2006. Everyone remembers, excuse me, everyone remembers what happened in 2006, where we had a huge, real estate prices actually went very high. It was actually a time when people were borrowing more. And so there's just this huge thing with adjustable rate mortgages, and people were continuously upgrading the houses, and they were financing houses that they could not actually afford. And so when that happened, that really drove the prices up, and it was artificially driven up. There was not enough to sustain the prices being so high. And so what happened was back in 2005, 2006, you have a supply and demand forces that made the housing inventory to come to a low point. And so it became a seller's market, which is at the peak. When you see here, the peak here, this is when we're starting out, 2005, 2006. And during the run up to this period, this is what we would call the expansion period. But starting at, when you get to this period, you had a lot of capital coming into the system. And then at this point, there was a lot of, this is actually a good point. Anytime you're coming in through this expansion point, going up to the peak, you have appreciating values, and it's actually a good time to do what's called the fix and flips, where you buy a house and then you do the renovations, and then you try to sell it for profit. Great time to do it during this period of expansion, running up to the peak. And so that was what was going on before. Wait a second. Yeah, so that was what was going on before, right up to 2006. However, in 2006, as we all know, that's when we had a decline in prices for the real estate. So, and oh yeah, one other point that I was going to mention is that this cycle does not necessarily coincide with the overall economic cycle. In 2006, when the real estate prices peaked, the overall economy was still humming along. But when the real estate prices started to decline from 2006 and 2007, this is actually what helped to trigger the Great Recession that we saw in 2008. So it was a specifically dangerous time for the economy, and it was specifically the real estate that actually helped to bring the decline in the overall economy. I'm not gonna get into the details as to why that happened. Basically, people could no longer afford to pay their mortgages. And because they couldn't afford to pay the mortgages, foreclosures started to happen. And a lot of the big banks that were betting on the mortgage-backed securities, they were betting on assets that really were not good. And so that actually helps to fuel the decline in the economy ultimately. And when that happens, specifically coming back to the real estate cycle, when that happens, you start to see the decline in home values. When this is during all this period of time, employment is going up, unemployment is skyrocketing, and so people can't pay for their house, and they get foreclosed on, and then the bank takes the house, and very soon there's a glut of houses in the whole market. So when you have multiple houses, so many houses, that's when you have what's called a buyer's market. It goes from being a seller's market up here, where there's relatively few houses, and it becomes what's called a buyer's market. So this is what was going on all the way from 2006, 2007, all the way till, I mean, the Great Recession was said to have gone from 2007, end of 2007, to the middle of 2009. So we had a huge decline during this period of time. And so the key thing to remember during a recession is that as prices decline, properties become more deeply discounted, and it's a good time right in here to start looking at buying. If you wanted to get into rentals, it's a good time to start buying buying right in here, going after even the better properties, the Class A and Class B. These are the better properties. You might want to look at getting into those right in this area. And so what happens is it will continue to decline until you get to down here where everything just bottoms out. When this happens, this is when you won't know necessarily when everything's going to turn, because you won't know exactly when it happens, but you'll start to understand that things are changing when, for example, if you were going for foreclosed properties, things will start to become a lot more competitive. It'd be harder to get the deeply discounted properties. And so that's how you know recovery is happening, when it's very difficult to get their foreclosures and the prices start to rise. And so this was going on in 2010 to 2011. This is the kind of the recovery period that we're having. And then all the way up to about 2012 was the recovery. And then we started to have the expansion again. Just a second. So we start to have the expansion again. And so basically from 2012 all the way up to this present day, we've been having a good expansion. Now, present day, we have the coronavirus that's happened. And so even though the coronavirus, like I said before, the real estate cycle does not necessarily coincide with the economic cycle. So we have the coronavirus that hit, and we have a GDP that has now dropped by, that is in the process of dropping by estimates of between 30 and 50%. So even though the GDP overall in this country is dropping and we have unemployment in many places, just like even in the Atlanta market, we still have a small amount of houses available. And so when you have a small amount of houses available and more demand, you still are in a seller's market. So we still have not necessarily peaked in the housing cycle, at least for the Atlanta area and for a lot of places in the nation. So we're still kind of here, even though things are getting bad economically overall. So it's hard to say exactly how long we're gonna be in this position. But so I would say, I mean, the biggest thing to understand is there's no time like the present. If you're interested in making a move, if you have an extra property that you want to sell, it's good to go ahead and think about selling. Because go ahead and get into the selling, because you don't know how long it's going to be before you start to see the decline in houses again, and where you go into, and where the recession takes over in the housing market, and you start to see it coming down again. So yeah, that's basically what I had to say about the housing, and then I'll let it go. Let me go ahead and let Chima take over, talking about maximizing opportunities in real estate flips.
Welcome everybody. My name is Chima Nwosu. So if a lot of you here know me already, and thank you, Ugo, for inviting me to the forum to talk about real estate. I'm a business owner, and I'm also now heavily involved in real estate investment. And mostly I do buy and flips, I do new construction. And I got out from what Oji just said. I'm on the contrary to what he said. That's why I'm here. So he said, obviously this is a seller's market that is best to sell. I also see it as a time to buy. So because there are still opportunities out there. And when you look at the market right now, if you put a property up for sale, if your property is good, it's gonna sell. My wife is a real estate agent, and the houses that she has put up for people, and within a week, those houses sold. And some of them had as much as 6 offers, and these are all full offers. So the market is still good in a way because of the way the president or the United States government stepped in to arrest the situation, because obviously Corona was setting to kill everything, crash the whole system. But the way they set up the forbearance, give people assistance and stop the foreclosures. So all those things are helping the market now. How long will this go on? I believe they will sustain it till a point whereby the economy can fully recover by its own. So if they see that it's working, I won't see any reason why they should let the system fail if you have a solution that is working. So now that leads me to the buy and flip opportunities that I'm here to talk about. So at least to give you, I said that just to give you, background on how I think the market is doing. So now I'm mostly buy and flip in Atlanta. So Atlanta is one of the fastest growing market. So if you're fortunate to be in Atlanta, this is the best market to invest in real estate when it comes to flips, new construction, or whatever angle you want to go to. The hottest area I see right now is in the downtown Decatur area. So from my experience, those areas you could, if you have the ability to invest in a flip of, say, an average of 200,000 to buy the house and flip it, flip in sense of do a major renovation, maybe add a bedroom, add an upstairs, whatever you intend to do, as long as you're adding good amount of square footage, you're gonna see potential profit in the neighborhood of 200,000 on a house, just on a single flip. So those opportunities are still around, because what happened is in downtown Atlanta, like the Kirkwood, Edgewood, Decatur, all those places, it's more of those communities are more of, I'll say, like a melting pot. those communities becoming the new New York, the New York of Atlanta. So people are mixing well. Blacks and whites are living. You can see a very, I'm telling, like a $1 million house. Next to it is an old rundown ghetto mechanic shop. They don't care. So they are living, everybody, I mean, the crime rate has decreased. The police have done an excellent job in that area. So those areas are hot. Now, if you look at some areas, you're gonna see price decline. I'm not just saying everything is good in Atlanta, but some areas are experiencing decline. Johns Creek right now is experiencing decline. So you're gonna see a lot of inventory coming into the system. People are putting up for sale and they keep dropping price. A lot of people are not buying in this area. So most of the young people coming out of college have a 6-figure income. They move, or people that move into Atlanta, most of them are buying near the downtown area. So, and less of the suburbs as it used to be before. The older generation are more into the suburb, but the newer ones ain't. So how do you get into this opportunity? So if you don't have the money to say do a big investment in terms of buy a large fleet, because most of the, like Oji said, he does a private loan, private cash management. So he could get you a loan, but you still need a down payment. So if you cannot do that, you could do what I see most people do, and sorry, I will say white people, but what you see them do in these areas that I mentioned, they go there and they rent, they buy a cheap house that is livable. So like they'll go there, buy a house for 100,000. They will live in it. They won't flip it. They'll just buy it and leave that. And what are they doing? They're putting their money in the best market. So they're not trying to flip it. They're not trying to do any work on it. They just live in it. And those houses appreciate in value crazy because all the houses around it are being remodeled. If you have the money, they are being remodeled, resold for a lot of money. So they know they are sitting on a cash cow. So they just leave there. Also, if you don't want to live there, if you feel like that's not the kind of place you want to live, you could buy those houses and rent it. Those are very good renting places. So you could either rent it, you could do Airbnb. All those areas that I mentioned are hot for those. So you could still do that, and you could be getting income to manage the flow, your cash flow, and also enjoy the value that will go up. The house will definitely go up, and at some point you're gonna sell it. So if you decide to sell it, or decide when you have the cash capability to go ahead and flip it, at that point you're gonna make good income. So that's one of the 2 ways to get into it. Also, as I mentioned, a personal home. So you could buy, if you feel like you could live there, you could buy as a personal home, live there for a few years, sell or rehab. You could partner with someone or investors. So some of the things I do for people, I'm not saying you do it with me, but what I do for people, they come to me and they say, hey, I want to do a flip, but I don't know anything about a flip or the market, but hey, I'll give you this money, let's buy a property. So I can help you get a good property, help you get into the business. You know, you ride along the whole process. It doesn't have to be a major project. There's a lot of smaller project people can do and still come out with a little cash on top. And then finally, you could go into new construction, which is the ultimate big bang. So if that is something someone is leaning into and you have the money, that one you are short of your money because you're building a brand new house. It's going to sell as a brand new house. I think that's all the opportunities I have in flipping at this time.
Mr. Chima, good evening.
Yes, good evening.
My name is Linda, and Mr. Okafor's neighbor. How much does it normally take to flip a moderate house, like a 3-4 bedroom house, indicator that you just said?
It depends on where in Decatur. If you're looking at the city of Decatur, the city of Decatur has the best school system. So the city of Decatur, it will cost you more. But if you're looking outside the city of Decatur, so you could buy a house in that area for like 150. I've seen them like in the one something range. And when you say flip, it depends on what you're trying to do also. Are you trying to add a square footage? If you're adding a square footage, you go to the comps in the area, see how much your final product is gonna sell. So based on the square footage you're adding, your eventual square footage. If you're not adding a square footage, you wanna make sure you're buying a house that you could still have room to do improvement. Like you don't wanna buy a house with a small bathroom, even though you design it as much as you can, you still end up with a small bathroom. So you still want to, look at those processes and say, okay, if it is a small project and the house is big and comfortable, it may cost you 30,000 to get that going and sell. But if it is a major project, you're doing a foundation, you're adding an extension, or you're covering a carport to make it a room, those will cost you in the neighborhood of 80 to 100,000 to do. But then again, you're looking at whatever square footage you're producing, how much is it gonna sell comp-wise when I'm done? So you have to make sure you have those numbers together.
Okay. So without adding extra square footage, is considered a small project. When you add a major, okay. So whereby you don't have to go to the county, is considered a small square footage. Is that correct?
Yeah, if you're not doing an extension, you don't have to go to get a permit. You can tell them, but those permits, usually you could get it in the same day. You walk in, you get it. So it's not a big deal. But whenever you're doing a big addition or doing electrical work or plumbing, major, they want to make sure you're doing it right. That's why you get a permit, and someone has to come and inspect it to make sure it's done right.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. So,
hi, Chima.
Chima and the other panelists, just a quick reminder, I think we're on slide 11 of 17. It's 8:48, so if we can just speed things up quickly. There are questions coming in. I'm sure that people have questions as well. So if we can just kind of go through, I'm not saying quickly, but quickly. And let's see if we can knock it out.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Let me go through the next topic we want to talk about is a look at your family's expenses, both on.
So Oji, I think we skipped a topic. Chima was going to talk about there. Have we covered that?
Yes. Yeah, we talked about that. Right?
No, I haven't covered this yet. Okay.
Yeah.
There's opportunities that can be attached to real estate. Okay, quickly, I'll go through that real quick. Let's say you don't want to do a full real estate investment, or what I've observed is the market is really heating up, and being heating up means you also have all the adjunct services around real estate. Those carriers are also heating up. And I've identified several opportunities that people can actually go into and start their own business just supporting real estate. They don't have to be investors and dealing with the house. No. Several of those opportunities I've identified. You could be a surveyor. So if you take a licensed exam and get passed by the Board of Georgia to become a surveyor, you could do that. And trust me, every surveyor you call in Atlanta to come survey your land, they'll give you a 2 weeks notice. Like they'll give you a 2 weeks time because it is just that busy. And there are only a few of them in Atlanta. So if you're doing your survey and your price is really good, trust me, you will be overbooked. And that's a very good business I've identified in the real estate circle. Another business is appraiser. Every one of us know if you're buying a home, someone has to come appraise it. Those guys are making money because a lot of properties are being sold. All this is surrounding real estate. So you take, I think you have to take an exam, pass or whatever, and then you could be a registered appraiser or surveyor. You could be a real estate agent, which a lot of us are familiar with. I do encourage everyone, if you can, to be an agent, because at some point in your life, you're gonna wanna buy or sell a house, or you will know someone that wants to buy and sell a house. Even if you get one deal a year, that could mean $20,000, just one. So you don't even have to be active. Someone you know in Nigeria may wanna buy a house for 600,000, boom. You make money right there. So just being an agent could be a props that you will need at some point in your life. You could be an inspector. All these flips we're doing, working with the city, the financing company, the bank, they send out inspectors all the time. And those inspectors, as of now, they are overwhelmed. So the same thing with the surveyor. If you want to get an inspection, it takes time because the demand is just too much. And then finally, you could look into an insurance adjuster for real estate, like if you have claims, like our guy, Mr. Okafor said earlier. So they send an insurance adjuster to come and review your house and give you estimate on how much it will cost. So those are careers that I've identified that one could start up as a business owner around real estate without actually going into investment.
All right. Sounds good. So real briefly, I'm just going to talk about what you should be doing with your family's expenses during this period. And the key thing to remember, I would say, is that during this economic crisis, we don't know precisely how long it's going to last. You may have heard in the media people talking about potentially a V-shaped recovery versus a longer recovery. We don't know really. So it's actually very important to actually hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. You got to prepare for the long haul. And then you also need to realize that it's important that you become as lean as possible in terms of your finances. You need to be your expenditures need to be driven down as much as possible. You need to be saving as much money as possible basically because of what I just said. And so I would say the main tips I have for you, a few weeks ago, we discussed, actually this forum discussed the different government programs, the PPP loans and the CARES Act, and all those government programs. My advice is to go ahead, make sure if you qualify for it, you need to go ahead and apply. You need to get in line and get the government money, because you don't, even if you have your own resources, you have savings and everything, and you say, hey, I don't really know if I want to go get a government handout. That's the American way. So the American way, you need to go ahead and get in line. Even the richest corporations, when the government's handing out money, they get in line and get theirs too. So you need to go ahead and do that. You need to preserve whatever resources that you may have for your own self, in case of any type of situation that you may have in the future. So, but when the government's handing out money, you get yours. That's my first tip. And then my second tip is to sit down with your bank statement. It's common sense, but you need to go through line by line everything in the past month, and you need to divide it into 3 different categories. One category is the things you need to have, and then the next category is things that you like to have but not necessarily need, and then the third category is things that are not necessary and that can be expendable. So of course that third category you get rid of, and then you really kind of take a look at that middle category of things you like to have, and you need to just kind of look and see, like for example, something like Netflix. You need to have that to decompress from stress and everything. So that's something that's a like to have, that I would say that if it helps you get through this whole situation, you should go ahead and keep it. And then not only would you go back for the last month, you need to go back for the whole year, you need to look at your bank statements for the past year. Why? Because you probably have some annual charges that are there that if you may have forgotten about, and you don't want that annual charge. It could be several hundreds of dollars sometimes hitting you unexpectedly during this time. Because if it hits you, that, you know, sure, you could call the company and get it reversed, but that could be 5 or 6 days where you're out of that money, and during this critical time, it could be a huge stressor. So it's good to even go back a whole year. It's worth it. See what you don't need. Cut those annual expenses out too. The next thing I would say is that, let's see, there's some things that you temporarily will have to not pay. Some things, like for instance, sometimes they may give you the opportunity to do a little bit of the mortgage forbearance. I don't know if we talked about that in the previous time here, but you may have to look into that while you pay other bills, take a little break. And then if you have some money that you've applied for to kind of come in, you can actually wait for that to come and then pay off your mortgage at a later date. But you might have to focus on deferring some bills, for example, when they give you the opportunity to, while you take care of other things that are necessary, like food and things like that, if you're in the bind like that, for example. So you just have to think about, sometimes you may defer, you know, stagger some bills, pay them a little bit later, take care of some necessary things right now. My other tip would be to make sure that you can even go and negotiate with companies. You can even talk to companies. If there's some things that you might not, like in that middle category, things you'd like to have. Oh, hello? Okay. Yeah, the things that you like to have, you may even call the company and negotiate and say, hey, I would like to keep this, but it's a little too expensive for me. Can we come to a deal and negotiate that down? And they may want to keep you as a customer and actually cut the price for you on certain things. My next tip is to make sure that you have an emergency fund. Make sure that you work to build up your emergency fund, and in this, especially in this situation, but in other situations too, if you have the opportunity to, any extra money that you have, go ahead and stash it away. In fact, Susie Orman says to try and get to 8 months, but that might not be possible. You might just do 1 month. That's better than nothing. Some saying something? Okay. Okay, so yeah, so that might be something that you, you know, if you can even do 1 month, that's better than nothing. And then once you get to 1 month, get to 2, or get to 3. That might be all you can do, but at least have something stashed away. You need to have that. That's very critical before you pay down any debts. Actually, during this period of time, it's not the time to necessarily pay down any debts. It's really important to have cash on hand for emergencies or things like that. So it's, at this time, it's best to service your debts. Whatever debt you have, pay the minimum payment. It's okay during this period of time to go ahead and actually, you know, if you have to rack up debt, that's okay. You know, it's better to actually go ahead and try to maintain cash as opposed to paying off all your credit cards if you have the opportunity to. Then the next thing I would say is for those who have a small business. If you have a small business, you need to look at all your expenses as well, just like I described before. And you also need to look at advertisement costs and things like that. I would say that they should be providing you a even better return on investment than what you were having before. So if $1 was bringing in $3 before, you might think about actually requiring whatever you're investing in to bring in $5. That way, if it's not meeting that threshold, you keep that money and you hold it and save it. That way, you have to learn to be more efficient. Figure out ways, whatever things you're doing for your business to get business, become more efficient and become more lean so that you can actually continue to operate and you can continue to keep moving along. You don't want to run out of money. You want to do everything you can to continue functioning, and even if it takes, even if it's not as a great way, or if you feel like it's a little bit more cumbersome, but as long as you can find something more efficient both, especially in money. That's the most important thing. And then, okay, so that's basically what I had to say about your budget. And then I was just gonna go over, have you applied for the homestead exemption? And so most people here have probably heard about the homestead exemption, but I'm gonna go over it very quickly. It just, the key thing about the homestead exemption is a homestead is a dwelling, is basically your house and the land around it, okay? So that's the definition of homestead. And homestead laws are laws that exempt the homestead from liability or debts of the owner. And these laws are predicated on the idea that being able to peacefully reside in your home is more important than payment of debts. So hence, the homestead exemption has to do with lowering of the property taxes collected by the state and also by the county. So the key thing for the homestead exemption here in Georgia is that you must actually have owned the property as of January 1st in the year that you file it. And you must file it by April 1st in the year that you want the homestead exemption to go into effect. And the key thing is that once the homestead exemption has been filed, you don't have to refile it again unless two things occur. So the one thing is if there's any change in the ownership of the property. So so the key thing is just to check with your county tax commissioner or tax assessor's office. And sometimes even if you have a change because of change in your name, a legal change in your name because of a marriage, that too may actually require you just to file another application. And so just you have to check with the office and make sure it may vary between counties. And then also if there's anybody who's added to your deed of the property, any additions or subtractions, most likely you will need to also file a new application in order to make sure that it applies for that year. And so any change in ownership is one. And also if you move, you need to file a new application as well for your new property. And you need to go back and revoke the old homestead exemption for your old property because you moved. And so it's important to do that because it's considered fraud to have this exemption in place and to not actually live on the property. Okay, and then the other thing we're going to talk about is this a time to refinance your home? And so the key thing to understand is that right now, interest rates are very low. Part of that is because of monetary policy of the Federal Reserve. They have continued to lower the interest rates. At this point, they're almost close to zero. And so when the Federal Reserve eases monetary policy, well, let me get too deep, but when they make money more or less expensive for people to borrow, basically when they lower the interest rates, that's what they're doing with the monetary policy. So because of that, if you want to refinance your property, it's something to consider at this point in time. One thing you need to make sure though is your credit is good. Make sure your credit is good, and also you have to consider there may be some fees that are involved. But here's one key strategy you can use when you refinance your property. You can consider all your high credit card bills, which are usually 20% APR, your other bills, anything that's expensive, anything like student loans, all those things, you could consider actually when you refinance going ahead and rolling all those loans into that refinance. The reason why people might consider doing that is because when you refinance like that, the interest payment on a refinance on a home is tax deductible. Obviously, everyone's hopefully have heard about the mortgage interest tax deduction. So when you use that strategy to kind of roll everything into a home refinance, sure, your equity may take a hit, your equity may decline, but the key thing is that interest payment actually becomes tax deductible. So that's one strategy one can use to save a lot of money in this, not only during the coronavirus, but in general, but especially during this coronavirus, so that you can have money on hand to do whatever you like to do. Chima, over to you.
Sorry, I was muted. So Ugo recommended I should talk about this section because I'm actually an IT business owner. So from 2006, I've owned several IT companies, starting from phone service and rolled up to 2020. I have a money transfer business. So I might use this as a free advertisement. I have Boxy Pay, so you go there to send money to Nigeria. So I'm well versed when it comes to IT. So, and with this Corona period, what we have seen is a peak in IT businesses. And most businesses that are online, let's take Amazon or Instacart, which are full-fledged delivery services, they have experienced high peak in terms of volume and activity. As a matter of fact, Instacart, as of last month, made their first profit, and their very first profit ever running Instacart was last month, and they made $30 million because their usage went up 500%, which is a lot. And they were able to, surprising, they were able to handle that growth, which was so sudden because Corona hit us unexpected, but which is impressive. However, they did it to be able to handle such growth in such a short time. So Amazon is also experiencing growth. As you can see, their stock is at an all-time high. And you look at Facebook, all these major IT companies, or even Zoom that we're talking on, they're all doing very well. So the question is, how can we as individuals invest into or become a part of this opportunity, take advantage of this? One thing I always tell people, you don't have to be a programmer to make money. So if you look at someone like, we all know Facebook, you know, Mark Zuckerberg, if you followed his story, watched the video, he wasn't the greatest programmer of all time. But if you're able to come up with an idea, and that idea, you could be able to hire people to do it. So you could be able to hire people to create a program, to get a website going, whatever idea that you have in mind. Just come up with something that is bright, creative, innovative, that someone can, you could pay someone in India to get it done. And once that product is full-fledged, just see the IT business as a baby, like you're nursing a baby. One thing a lot of us don't understand with business is business grows just like a child grows. So if you have a little baby, today it's not walking, you know, it's crawling, but tomorrow they start taking little steps, they start walking, they start fetching for things, and before you know, they're full-grown men. So that's how a business is, you nurture it. But the thing is, you gotta have one to nurture. So if you have one in place, all you need to now do is feed it, push it out online. One customer turns to 2 to 3. Before you know, it's a full-grown business and is making enough money for you to retire on. One way I see people can actually drive growth or make money in this economy is through deliveries. Sorry, my video went up. Through delivery services. So one way is you could import stuff from China. Let's say you're interested in selling tires. You could import tires wholesale from China, and then you could have a sort of delivery services built around it to deliver to people, or even to sell wholesale online. So people can order it online and you could ship it to them, or they could come to whatever facility you have it set up for them. So there are different ways you can tap into this. You could also import from Nigeria. Like one thing I'm working on right now, I'm working on a food delivery services. So the opportunity is there that we could take advantage of, because being here in the States, our money goes far. So with that, you could be able to buy what the money power you have to buy in Nigeria has just tripled because the economy, I mean, the dollar value, dollar to naira is keep going up and up. So now if you take your dollar there, you could buy more. And what that means is you could get more products that you could bring in here and you can be able to sell. So instead of exporting to Nigeria, you find a way to import from there in order to service our people or immigrants over here. So everything starts with an idea. You just have to come up with an idea. As I said, you don't have to build it. You could get people, outsource the job and let them create the idea, and then you just sit back and market it and let it grow. So that's all I need to say in IT. I think that kind of wraps us up, or is there any other topic left?
I think Oji is supposed to provide some tips on investing. Did you give up on that, Oji?
Tips.
That's cool. If you don't want to go into that, that's cool as well.
Well, yeah, sure. I can give some tips. I don't want to get into anything too controversial or anything, but I'll just say, here's what I would say about the investing. Just be careful in this environment, what you put your money into, because, the general principles is to invest for long term, invest in value-based companies, and to really know why you're investing. You have to know your why. I know currently things are going on right now with the stock market where it looks like it's doing very well. However, the GDP of the country is about to decline in the second quarter by 32 to even 50%, different estimates. So the economic data doesn't look very good, but yet the stock market looks like it's doing exceptionally well. So that's one thing to sort of really kind of be careful if you want to do it. Just be careful, be sure you put in stops. You should understand what those are. Those are things that will actually trigger if your investment falls below a certain level. Be sure to have that in because if something happens to the market, it may be very difficult for you to get in there and to cash out. So, and then also do your research. If you want to get into cryptos, do your research, learn as much as you can about it. You can, if you have any questions about it, you can contact me too, or even for real estate or anything, feel free to contact me. Or if you want to get into anything else, there's those options. There's other commodities that you might think about, or anything you want to do. Just be sure you know why you're investing in it.
All right, thank you. Before we go into the questions, I want to thank everybody, Akalaka for the insurance tips. I think those were awesome. And there are several questions on insurance there. Oji Agbai is like, if you haven't figured it out by now, he's just a general know-it-all other than being a medical doctor. He knows more than a little bit about several things. So I look forward to the questions that will come and to the thoughts that will come. Chima is our serial entrepreneur from, you name it, he's done several things. So, really appreciate the thoughts you all have shared thus far. Let me just go through the questions that we have on here. And most of them is just about insurance. So Greg, the first question is, I have a question about disability insurance. Is this something you would recommend?
It's good. We have short-term disability and we have long-term. So it's always good to have insurance. So in case if you lose your job, it depends on how long. The short-term disability will kick in, then for a longer time, the long-term disability will kick in. So it's good to have it. I would recommend that.
Okay. And by the way, I keep meaning to mention this. Oji, if you can skip to the final slide.
Oh, yeah.
So I keep meaning to mention this. Greg Okafor is happy, is obviously an insurance agent. So other than sharing his expertise and experience and, what he does for a living every day with us, I think it's also important that here in the community that we support one another. So to the extent that you have insurance need or you're trying to figure out what can you do with your insurance, we obviously have somebody that can help you in-house for you to link up with. And if you don't have their number, reach out to me or reach out to anybody here. I'm sure somehow we'll get to their number. Greg, you can post your number. Same with the other people, Chima and Oji. Chima is his own businessman, but he has his money transfer business called some of us are using Reptel or Buzz Revolution. Chima has had his own phone calling service for the past maybe 10 years or more. So, and he's doing Boxy Pay, which is a money transfer business. He's just a jack of all trades. So bottom line is, let's patronize each other. Let's support one another. So let me continue going down the questions. Another question for you, Akalaka, is what is the youngest you have to be to think about life insurance?
Very good question. The youngest can be 1 year old. That's what a lot of white folks do. When they have a child, they buy life insurance. So you can buy a life insurance as young as 1 year old. Like I said, there's no underwriting, it's guaranteed insurability, there's no medical. You just fill application, answer some question, and most of the time it's approved.
And just to follow up, so as the child grows, is there portability where the child now takes possession of the life insurance? Or
that's a good one. So usually what happens is, as the child grows, they can take over like 25 years old. When they finish college, they can take over. And it's guaranteed insurability. They can claim.
Thank you. You're on mute.
Buy like 100,000, 25,000. And they can increase the amount later.
Okay, and just following up on the question you had on your statement about funeral insurance, because as you rightfully pointed out, our community, we love to do wakekeeping, but part of the reason why we are doing this is Friday night that's typically reserved for wakekeeping in the Igbo community. We can do wakekeeping now. So you talked about funeral insurance. What, is there health check? You said there is no health check. So how expensive is it? You said there are three questions that they typically ask.
There's no medical. So what happens, we don't take your blood. Of course, we put your MBI, your medical record, just like your credit report. Then we ask you a couple of questions. Either you're approved or you're denied.
Okay. Can you preview some of those questions just for people because I think that's something that might be beneficial for the community.
So they usually ask you, like, if you have a terminal disease, like if you have cancer, if you have AIDS, those terminal disease, if you have any, most likely they will reject you. But if you have high blood pressure, diabetes, you're approved. But any terminal sickness, most likely they will deny you.
Okay. So I think Mr. John, thank you. So I think Mr. John, well, before that, okay, so someone mentioned, and I've been getting a lot of hits on this. Why don't you talk more about, I don't really get it, but we should have whole life insurance instead of the other one. So we're going to have a dedicated session on life insurance in a few weeks. And at that time, we can go in depth into the different types of life insurance, and we can bring people to talk about it at that time. So in maybe 3-4 weeks, we'll figure it out then. But
I can touch on it a little bit if that's okay.
It's just quickly because it's a rabbit hole. That's why I want to have a full session. But go ahead.
Okay. So why do somebody have a whole life instead of term life? So the main difference is whole life is permanent. Of course, it's more expensive, but it's permanent insurance until age 21. So term life is for a specific term, like 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And it doesn't have cash value. Whole life have cash value. That's the main difference.
Okay, thank you. So, so there is a question on auto insurance. It said, I have a comprehensive auto insurance with State Farm, but their fee is very high. So I had a terrible accident, hit by a trailer 3 years ago. The fault was the trailers. I was rushed to the hospital from the scene. So my insurance driver record now says I'm high risk. What's the best way to approach getting an auto insurance at a reasonable cost? So it's a three-way, right? So just to provide, I didn't fully read it, but it's a three-way where the trailer hit, you know, the person asking the question, and the person now hits a FedEx truck. And they provided a report to the officers in their favor. So long story short is somebody is judged as being high risk. So what is your tip for getting cheaper insurance? Okay, the main thing, like I said earlier, is to get a true quote, do a policy review, talk about 3 insurance companies, and get 3 quotes. And you can call me offline after this Zoom, and we can talk about it, because I need to know more details on that question. But generally, shop your insurance, get quotes, and compare coverages. Don't only shop based on rates. Very important, the coverage. And there's nothing like full coverage. I will say it again, there's nothing like full coverage. In my agency, we don't use that word. Do you have comp and collision? That's what most people call full coverage, but there's nothing like full coverage. On an auto policy, you have a lot of coverages. So for you to have a full coverage, you have to have all those coverages. But people mean comp and collision when they say full coverage. Okay. Okay, so the question is, I think this is with regards to the children insurance. It said, does the premium, does it increase as the kids get older? No. Okay. It doesn't increase. Okay, what is the oldest? Go ahead. The premium stays the same. Okay. It doesn't increase. What is the oldest one has to be for the funeral insurance? 80 years. 80 years old. Okay, great. And I think even me can take this one. For the burial insurance, how much is the premium? I guess it will depend, right? Yeah, it depends. It depends on the age. Yeah, it depends. Okay. All right, I think I've gotten through all the questions, and any other person, you guys can unmute your phone if you have questions. And it's not just questions. If you have ideas that you think would be beneficial to the community. But before we get into that, just want to share an overall thought about the economy and how that impacts all of us. If you look at, I think I made mention of this as we were wrapping up last week. Look at what's happening in the economy. I'm going to mute you, Dozier, for now. There we go. I'll unmute you right after. Okay. Just because of the background noise. So if you look at what's happening, for every unemployed person you see, that means somebody that's not making enough money to pay their car notes, to pay their mortgage, to go to the mall and to buy things, right? So what does that mean? If they're not going to pay their mortgage, if they're not going to pay their car note, if they don't go to the mall, that means the malls are going to close, right? It means mortgages will start getting foreclosed some more. So I think as of now, there is 40%. So for each business that, not 40%, 40 million people, right? And for each business that goes out of business, it puts commercial real estate at risk as well, right? So I share this to say, even if they're giving everybody $1,200 every month. You don't have a job, they give you $1,200. How much is their mortgage and car notes and insurance? Right? So it's not enough. So for us as a community, what that means is, Oji made mention of, if you want to sell house, the market is still good for selling a house now, but 40 million unemployed people. Before you know it, the economy will really start feeling it in the next 6. So they did this for forbearance, right, through September. And again, it depends on who you ask. You have forbearance, but at the end of September, 6 months, you have to pay them all at one time. Depends on who you ask. I don't think they're going to do it. You know, I think you'll still be staggered out. But the point is, forbearance doesn't mean you're not liable for your bill. You still pay it. They're just giving you a break for the next 6 months. So the question we all have to ask ourselves is, if people are not going to the mall, if there is social distancing where we're not going out to club and party and go to halls and caterers and DJs and all that, what would that do to the real estate market? The more people are unemployed. What might that do to our job? A lot of us Nigerians, Africans, we are in the health sector. Just type on Google, what's going on in the health industry, right? You know, from insider information from people that are on the board of hospitals, and even some doctors will tell you, hospitals are losing about 5% in revenue, which means that they cannot escape. Because if you really think about it, the people that are allowed in the hospital now are the really sick people. And most elective procedures have been stopped, and the elective procedure is what's making money for the hospitals. So as we look across, the economy is in peril. And as it relates to our pockets, I think we should all, if it is not necessary, don't spend it. Let's look out for opportunities that we know are sure that will boost our bank and boost our savings, and just plan for tomorrow, but do not take any financial risk. So I share all that, and I'll open the floor for other people that have thoughts.
How do we ask? Hello?
We can hear
Hello?
you, Lindsay.
Okay. The thing is that I have a question for this insurance person. How come Akalaka? I'm not Akalaka. Akalaka. Because the insurance something now. How come the insurance, if somebody gets involved in an accident and the other party is at fault, how come the insurance person will not pay the person as much as they will pay if Ken Nugent or other big lawyers are called in? That's my question, yeah. Yeah, the insurance person, okay, now sometimes, now listen, one of my colleagues had an insurance, had an accident, and he went to the insurance will not pay for his medical, for her medical, will not pay for other things. But when they call in Ken Nugent, they paid up almost 16G. Why does he have to take that for insurance to respond to somebody that is involved in an accident?
Okay. So it's basically a representation. Well, he has a lawyer. And I guess the lawyer was able to negotiate more money for him. That's basically what it is.
Oh, so there's no standard. So there's no standard.
Okay, maybe you're talking about the coverage. Are you talking about the coverage limit? Because every policy has a coverage limit. So
no, not the limit, but the payout. I mean, they wouldn't, okay, like an example I cited, they will not pay her, but we took agent to pay her. So it's a question of Ikeketolie, is it?
It's not Ikeketolie. Like your policy has a limit. It has a liability limit of, let's say 25,000, 50,000, 100,000. And that's the most the insurance company will pay. If you have 25,000, that's the most. So even if you get Ken Nugent, he cannot get you more than that. But what happened but what happened if you have an attorney, you get better representation.
Okay.
That's basically what it is.
So the best thing is not to deal with the insurance, just get an attorney. Okay, I get that. Thank you.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
Okay, that's what I understood, you know. That's what I understood.
Okay. I'm Alize.
Hey, Akalaka.
I'm Alize.
I got it.
All right.
Moderator.
I have a question for the insurance agency as well. So I've been with Geico for like the past 3 years now. And the thing is that I've never gotten in an accident before. So, oh, hello?
We can hear you. Go ahead. I think,
okay, sorry. It's just that the background was confusing me. Yeah, sorry. So what I'm saying is that I've been with Geico for like 3 years, and just like a few weeks ago, I was driving into a parking lot. I'm not a parking lot, a parking garage, like a friend's house. She had her car parked outside, and I was driving into her driveway to park my car, and I mistakenly just flushed her car, right? So I had filed the claim because she said like the bumper dent a little bit, so she wanted to get it fixed. So I filed a claim because I didn't want to give $100 and I wouldn't be able to afford it. So now 2 weeks later, my insurance is coming up for.
There's a noise at the background. There's a noise.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've muted it. Go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. My insurance is coming up for renewal in June, and all of a sudden my insurance just went up by $100. So I now called Geico and asked them why, that I've been a loyal customer. I've never had a major accident. This was just like a paint job that had to be done on the car. And they were like, and I was like, how long is this $100 going to be on my insurance? And they were like, it's going to be for 3 years. And so I was wondering, what would be the next step? Should I just look for a different company, or how do I mitigate that? Because I'm already paying like $1,500 at my out of pocket before the insurance thing kicks in. So I'm just wondering, what would be your advice in this situation?
Yeah, thank you so much. That's a very good question, and I'm glad you brought it up. And like I said earlier during my presentation, you don't want to file small claims. Insurance is not for small claims, it's for major claims. Your claim was for $600.
It was like $400 that they ended up paying her.
Yeah, you shouldn't have filed that claim. I advise my customers, call me. Of course, they will tell you, I have insurance, why can't I file a claim? You can file a claim. But what happened, it goes on your record. So even if the insurance company pays $600 or they pay $20,000, it's still a claim. So insurance is for major claim. It's not for minor claim. That's why I always recommend high deductible. We want to make you whole. If you have an accident, we want to file a claim. We want to make you whole. We pay that car off if it's total. Insurance company pay $100,000, $200,000. But it's one claim. But you can file a claim, $1,000 is still a claim. You attach your record. And this is going to be on your record for 3 years. The only thing I would suggest is you can shop around, compare rates, and decide what to do. But you don't want to file those small claims.
Thank you.
Okay. So there's a question on here for Chima. It says, can you provide any recommendation for outsourcing an IT project, like the design, building an app or website?
Yes, I have a team in India that I can always recommend to people. So they worked for me before and they did a great job. So if you do have something you want to build, I could always link you up with them. Their prices are good, and I can vouch for them in terms of delivering the job or getting it done right. So, because I've worked with them for almost 6-7 years, and I have no regret. So definitely, I do have one. Whenever you're ready, you could reach out to me or get my phone or email, and we could talk.
Okay. So is there any discussion on estate planning, trust, and will? I think we already touched on trust and will. We had a session like this that's fully dedicated to trust and will and estate planning. So, and I think there are some slides on that. It's just summary slides. So if you really want it, we can share it with you. So open it up, other comments, anybody?
Hello, good evening. Thank you so much for this opportunity. You go for organizing this, and for all the speakers. We really appreciate the insights you guys have shared with us tonight. My question is for Mr. Akalaka. The question is about home insurance. I recently observed that I have a water ingress issue in my basement, and I contacted my insurance agency about this leakage. At this time, I've not been able to get a foundation specialist to come and assess the damage and, you know, to understand what the root cause of the water ingress is and all that. But I was wondering, is this something you would consider a small claim, you know, from experience? Is this something I should withdraw from being filed with the insurance agency, or should I proceed with this claim? One other thing I need to mention is that I do have water backup on my coverage. So
good.
Yeah, so that's my question.
That's a good question. The first thing I will recommend is to get somebody to give you an estimate. What is the cost? Usually they don't charge you a fee. It's free estimate before you file a claim. You can file a claim, then adjuster can come there and it's not covered, and they will decline it, and it'll be on your record. So I would advise, get somebody to check it out and find out what it is before you file a claim.
Okay, one quick follow-up. I think because of the location of that water leak, they might have to open up that wall, and I was kind of concerned that once they tamper with that wall, then the insurance can claim that, oh, they've messed with the evidence, and now, you know, they can't ascertain the cause of the water leak, you know. And then so I was kind of worried about, you know, getting somebody in to dig into that wall to really understand the extent of work that needs done, you know, to give me a feasible or viable estimate, you know. So I'm not sure if I'm making sense, but that's my concern I'm sharing.
Yeah, you're making sense. It's like a catch-22. You can file a claim and they can come and look at it. But what happened is insurance is for accidental, anything accidental. If there's a deficiency in the foundation, most like insurance will not cover it. I mean, the builder, maybe when they build a house, there's a deficiency.
Okay.
Insurance doesn't cover that. So it really depends. Anything accidental, insurance covers it. Like I always tell people, home insurance is like auto insurance. You have your car, you have to maintain your car. If you don't change the oil, the engine will knock. And when your engine knock, you don't call your insurance company to replace it. They will not replace it. Same thing with your home. You have to maintain your home. So if there's a wear and tear, if there's a deficiency on the builder, insurance doesn't cover that. So it's a catch-22. You can file the claim, the adjuster can come and look at it. Like I said, it's going to be on your record. Or you can get somebody to check it out and go from there.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
So just for everybody else, and thank you, Akalaka. I'm looking at the time. We'll probably stretch this out to another 20 minutes. So for everybody that's on the call that want to ask question, I know some of you are raising your hand. We just haven't followed that format. We just unmute yourself and scramble to talk, because I'm getting side messages and people are saying they're raising their hands, and we just unmute yourself and
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I have a question for Chima in regards to building. Is it cheaper to build, or is it better to just buy right out?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I actually would, if you have the capability, it's always best to build if you have the resources. Why do I say that? Because when you build, not only are you building to your taste, how you want the house to be, but you're building equity right into the process. Because what happens is the cost of houses usually kind of fixed. Everything else is equity, and everything else is your improvements on the house when you build it. So let's say you go to an area, let's say, for example, Sandy Springs. So if you go to Sandy Springs and you want to buy a nice brand new home, it's going to cost you $1 million for a nice brand new home. But let's say you want to build that same home, you go to Sandy Springs, you could buy a land or old house for $350,000, and it's going to cost you, let's say, $300,000 to build you a brand new $1 million home to your taste. So right there, right at the point of you finishing the house, you have instant equity of like $350,000 right there. And after you finish the build, you go back to the bank and refinance the house. The bank will keep 20% of the money, which is your down payment. So meaning if the home is now appraised for $1 million, the bank will give you a loan of $800,000. But guess what? You only owe $650 on that home. So immediately you're pocketing another $150,000 just because you took the effort to build your own home. So I'm using Sandy Spring for example because the margin will make more sense, but it applies to every area you want to go buy a land and build.
Thank you all. This is Uche. I just want to thank all the panelists and the organizers for what you are doing for our community. This is very, very awesome because a lot of things we don't know, it's what's hurting our community. And for you being, a specialist in that area to share the information is so wonderful. Ugo, thank you, and thank you the Nigerian Igbo community for putting things like this up. I don't know much about IT and all that, but I love that insurance that I know a little bit about it from interest learning. So Brother Greg, I appreciate you bringing it to our community to know about life insurance. That's a way a lot of community are building legacy for their family. We look at it as the old life insurance, term life insurance, when somebody dies, other people benefit. But there are so many different kinds of life insurance these days that we can use to protect our family. We do wakes, but what do we raise there? I love we talked about final expense. That is something that we should do. Especially, most of us want our body to go back home. We really need to think about it, listen to that, and put that in place. And I love what you said about children when they're born, their parents buy insurance for them when they're little, and it's a way to build money for schools. All these student loans our children are having now, they don't need to have it anymore. And I hope the young generation will not make the mistakes that we made by not planning ahead. In this country, the first 18 years of a child's education is free, elementary school, middle school, and high school. And that's for you to save up for your child's education. And there are so many ways you can save that. And Ugo, thank you that you said you're going to talk more about life insurance. Life insurance is a very good way for you to build, money. I mean, there are some books that you can read, Money, Wealth, Life Insurance, how the wealthy use life insurance to build wealth, and tax-free retirement. They all tie it up to life insurance. So I hope that series on life insurance will come up and that we can learn more about that. So thank you all. Thank you, Brother Greg, and thank you, Chima and Oji, for sharing. Thank you all.
Thank you,
Thanks
Uche.
for your insight, Auntie Uche.
Thank
You know, we'll obviously go more in depth with the life insurance and all the other insurance options, whole term, you know, index life, all those other term life, you know, whatever those terminologies, because we hear about them so much, and life insurance makes sense, and that's why we've been talking about dedicating a session for it. You know, Akalaka at the beginning said we don't like to talk about it, but it is inevitable. We cannot escape it, right? And a lot of us want to go home to Nigeria. We don't want to be buried in America when the time comes. But we want to do wakekeeping, or we leave our children to figure it out. We can solve for it now, you know, in a way that makes sense without taxing people and overburdening people. We can also make better decisions on our retirement. So to get, and we can also help our survivors become better off, right? So we are going to be able to lessen burden on the people that we left behind who are already agonizing, but at the same time, put them in a better position financially than we all were. And those are the tangible benefits of life insurance. That's why it's important for this session. But to understand more about it, the different options there are, we're going to have a full session on that maybe in the next 1 month, next 3-4 weeks. So any other question, any other person?
Yes, Patrick.
Go ahead, sir.
Good evening, y'all.
Good evening.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I just want to contribute. I'm trying to actually get into contribute. I'm regarding the real estate. I actually think Mr. Ogo have said, within the next 6 months, I can see things really changing because of the job loss. What I will advise everybody right now is to try to spend less. And also, I know it's kind of really hard for one person to go into the real estate if you don't have a lot of money. But if the world, like the Jewish people and other communities are doing, you find that 1, 2, 3 family, friends could put money together, because to start a little real estate, especially with the way the market is going before the end of the year. I don't want something that happen before to happen, but it might not be that bad, but I can see a lot of foreclosures coming up. And interest rate is very low right now, but the banks are withdrawing most of their programs that they have as of January, February. 20 to 40% of those programs are gone because the bank has scared. So they are not actually lending some of those programs that they used to have. So what that tells us is that before the end of this year, things are not going to be the same. So there's going to be, I can see a lot of foreclosures, a lot of houses in the market, but right now the market is still very strong. People are buying because people still have jobs. People are still, getting the unemployment and all that. But how long that's going to continue, nobody really knows. But the main thing I'm trying to tell everybody is that if you don't have to spend money, don't spend money now. But you can save up money, have a lot of cash, so that when the market do crash, if you can't do it by yourself, look for a friend, look for a family member that you could buy, invest in the real estate together. And at the end of the day, it's gonna be what you're doing. Every successful person in this country, whether it's Trump, whether it's Warren Buffett, they have something to do with the real estate. You can never go wrong in real estate. This is not even the time to start buying if you want to buy the real estate now, buy something that is under $100,000, because no matter how bad the market is, those houses don't really, the economy doesn't affect those houses. It's something you can easily, when the market picks up, it's something you can sell and make twice what you pay for it.
Okay. So
and go ahead.
Go ahead.
And what he was talking about investing in the Decatur, yeah, the Decatur actually got blown out. People, I mean, what people are doing in the Decatur, if you want to invest in the Decatur now, if it's a small house, you can really take out the roof and go up. I think that is the best way to go in the Decatur if there's no land. It's cheaper to build up than to expand by digging foundation and building out. Because I've done both ways. It saves me almost about $25,000 by taking out the roof, by going up, than trying to dig foundation and pour slab.
Okay.
For that person that asks of housing indicator, that I just had to throw that in.
Thank you, Patrick. So for those that do not know the person talking, you know, why is he speaking the way he is? John Okobo, he owns his own brokerage firm. He's a developer. So he builds, he buys, he sells. He does real estate for a living. If I actually knew that we're going to we'll spend a lot of time on real estate, would have definitely had him on, but the panelists kind of threw out topic, as you know, but he made a point. You know, we know someone during the recession that maxed out his credit card and bought a house, right? Bought a house for $20,000, $30,000. Now the house is probably what, about $150,000. And everybody was like, man, how did I miss out on this opportunity? But his point that he made is that real estate is not cheap to get into. And because of that, I will encourage every one of us to look at, if there is a crash, if the unemployment numbers sustain, right, then there'll definitely be a crash. And if there is a crash, are you ready to get into it? And one way to do it is find who you can partner with. And it's not just about real estate, it's really about everything. You know, people trying to do website, people trying to do delivery, virtual world opportunities that exist, but more importantly, real estate because of the cash capital requirements, right? So find people that you trust that you can get into and take advantage of the opportunity when it comes, okay? I've gotten a message, be conscious of time, is 9:53, even though we will stop formally at 10, but I think we'll still have this forum and everybody can keep chiming in and discuss. So any other thoughts? We'll probably take 2 or 3 and wrap up.
I have a quick one on real estate for Chima and Dr. Ojai, I'm sorry. Oh, Oji, sorry, Dr. Oji. So I would like to know what you guys think about multi-family properties, like building a multi-family property for investment. Would you recommend going that route? I mean, building one, or just going the route of flipping instead?
Let me go first. I will recommend multifamily. The reason being that it is, when you say multifamily, you're building more than one at the same time, right?
Yes, basically like a duplex or fourplex kind of.
Townhomes. Yeah, yes. So I'll recommend that because you're concentrating all your effort in one place, all your resources in one place to make greater return. So let's say you're building 10 properties in the lot. So all your effort is in one place you could actually hire a foreman to manage everything. It's easier to manage, and the reward will be much better. And also they sell quicker. When you're talking of townhomes, they sell quick because there's always a first starter home, people that want to buy their homes the first time, and they're cheaper. They're usually less than 300,000 or 250 or whatever. So I will always go with that. But the challenge with that is you have to have more experience to even be thinking about that, because now you have to buy a virgin line, you have to develop the line, you have to get your sewer, your electricity, you have to build the roads, tar the roads. So now you're going into a major stuff that if you're doing a flip, you just walk into a building, you have a lot, you just work with that lot. But when you're talking multifamily, and keep in mind, those areas, the utilities are always on the ground. So you have to figure all this out. And it's not cheap. You could get a civil engineer that will do all that, but they're gonna charge you money.
Yeah, I'll just
Quick,
like
if I would chip in quickly, so just to clarify, when I said multifamily, I wasn't thinking about 10 units. I was thinking of more like 2 max or 4 units, combined on one lot, that kind of number, not 10.
Well,
More like between 2 max or 4, in which one will live in. I'll personally live in one of those units, pending the time I, let go of the property for rental or whatever,
So you're talking something like a duplex.
Yes.
So that means the city or the county has to approve that lot for a duplex, which is not always easy. That doesn't come easy. You could get that in city of Atlanta, some places in the city of Atlanta, like in historic district, but it's not very common to get those approval anymore.
I think it's a very interesting thing to look at because basically what you'd be doing is you would be buying it with the end person you want to buy it, you want to sell to will be an investor, most likely. Like Chima said, if you can get it, if you can figure out how to get it built and how to get it financed and everything, an investor would be very interested, because in a single family home, the highest and best use for that's a term that we have in real estate. Highest and best use for a single family home is as a principal residence for somebody. But when you talk about duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, the highest and best use is as an investment property. And those actually, in real estate, those are higher demand, because when you look at the return on investment, there's this thing called a rent versus value ratio, RV ratio. You are actually higher when you have one of these multi-family properties versus a single family home. It probably maxes out when you get to quadplexes. And yet, you can do what you said you want to do. For example, the whole thing about living in one of the properties and renting out the other properties, you can actually get an FHA loan to do that. For somebody who wants to buy one of those properties, they can get an FHA loan to do that, and then you get a lower down payment that's required, and then they only have to live in the house for about 12 months actually. So, but that's something for your end person, for investor. There'll be a demand for that.
Thank you very much.
What you thinking of doing? You're gonna do better if you find an older home. They still have some in Cobb, like in our state Mapleton area, but you're gonna do better by looking at older one to buy to fix up and sell. But trying to get a permit to build a new one, for the past 5 years or more, Cobb County has not issued any new permit for all the duplexes or quadruplexes.
Wow.
For new construction. It's just like trying to build an apartment in Cobb in 2020 is like putting an like head of the camel through the eye of a needle. So you're gonna be better, because some of those houses, if something happens and they will not even let you rebuild it. Wow. So they're doing away with all those quadruplexes and all that, but you can still find an older one, I think, to be cheaper for you to really do, because the land is not there, that is zoned for that. The zoning process is not easy.
I see. One other thing is that I'm not in Georgia. I mean, I'm based in Tennessee. And also, I think that sums it up. I'm based in Tennessee, so the dynamics of getting approval might be a little different from, you know, a major city like Atlanta. So, and also finding and hold multi-family property that is on sale is very hard to find one, because usually it's an investment property and the owners are probably keeping it for the income stream and all that. So it's usually very hard to see it on the market. And when you do, the prices are usually ridiculous, you know. That's my experience, and particularly in my market. So I don't know what applies out there, but yeah. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we want to wrap it up because we are pushing the 2-hour time limit. And our panel, Dr. Agbai and Mr. Chima, also Mr. Nwosu and Mr. Okafor, Akalaka, we thank you guys very much. And today we have had the highest attendance so far. So this speaks to the value of the information we provide here to the community and how much it is appreciated. And one more time, we also want to clarify that what we offered here are suggestions, and by no means are these the final words on any of the opinions or knowledge and information shared. So before you make any decisions to absolve us of any liabilities, I should say, please consult your personal insurance or real estate or financial advisor and make your decisions accordingly. Next week, we are promising to bring you another very information-packed session, and it's going to be on Igbo people in diaspora, our cultural heritage, what is the value for us and what is the way forward. And we have very quite impressive members of the community, and a paramount ruler, a traditional ruler actually, from Nigeria will be here, and he will be co-hosting with another matriarch from the community, Mrs. Ezekweche. You all may remember her from a few weeks ago when she and her husband spoke about family values and other stuff. So once again, we thank you. We thank all the panelists. We thank the Nigerian Catholic Igbo community, CMO. We thank Ugoesoke and our president, Odenibo. I don't think he's here today. And as we wrap up, we look forward to seeing you all next week at 8 o'clock Friday, as always. And come prepared, because you'll be educated, you'll be informed about our culture, and you'll be better for it, and invite your friends. Have a nice weekend, everyone.
Thank you.
And you can stay on if you want to stay on. For anybody that want to chit chat, you know, I think we'll still have the panelists on, or some of them that want to stay behind. You know, Akalaka is still in the office just to do this. I think we should let it go home. It's 10 p.m. Don't try.
That was a good